Joining us now is DJ Taylor, writer and George Orwell biographer. Hello, thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. Totalitarian might upset some people, what he was depicting. What do you think he'd make of that?
Judging what Orwell would have made of anything 72 years after his death is not much of a runner. But I think what amuses me, I suppose, about this is where that decision came from, because as far as I can make out, no student at the University of Northampton had actually complained about this. It was a decision taken by supposedly somewhat fearful academics, and so many of the custodians of culture and academia are rather fearful at the moment. And I think it was a case of sort of trying to get in and prevent trouble before it had actually happened. So if any student had complained, I suppose I'd be slightly more sympathetic towards this than I am at the moment.
I suppose if we start along this road, there'll be an awful lot of books that we'll need to put on, give trigger warnings.
I think that's a very good point. I can see why, if you were a secondary school teacher with a class of 13-year-olds, and this was on the syllabus, you might say to them, there is material in here that you may, when you come across it, find disturbing and upsetting. I mean, it's that cage of rats that people always complain about in the Winston Smith interrogation scenes. But by the time you come to be an undergraduate, I think you have to accept that if you're studying English or any other kind of literature, part of the point of a great deal of it is that it is challenging and potentially offensive. And it's up to you to be able to get your head around that. And if you're not comfortable with that, then it's possible that the literature is not the kind of thing that you ought to be studying.
And certainly, spoiler alert, stay away from Clockwork Orange. 1984 famously warns of a heavily censored world. There's a certain irony there.
There is a great irony, but this is what always happens with books of that nature. The idea that you're prophesying something that might actually come to affect your own works. It's interesting. One interesting thing is to give it a bit of historical context, and I certainly know from my own researches that when that book was in proof, a couple of months before it was being issued, in the summer of 1949, there were occasions. There was an occasion when it was presented and advance copies were given to a collection of booksellers whom it was hoped would stock it in their shops, and they were absolutely terrified. And the reports back of middle-aged men being given nightmares. I'm told that my grandmother, when she watched the first BBC dramatization of it in the early 1950s, was absolutely terrified. But of course, this was over nearly 70 years ago, and I think possibly, the public taste has perhaps got a little more sophisticated since then. So I would have to say this is saying a bit much.
Yeah, you don't like pigs walking on the back legs. You're not going to like Animal Farm either. It's good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme.